Hi, this is CJ with CompRCC.com. This is a second update to the Mini-Z Moto Racer, and I am putting on the aluminum front suspension. In case you're interested in this product, it is MCW005, that's the part number, and I got this for $38. This thing is just gorgeous. Let me just hold this up so you can get a good look at it. It is really nicely made, all anodized. The suspension is just super fluid. There's no stiction there whatsoever. And this comes with, like all of Kyosho's upgrade parts, comes with directions on what to take off and how to do the assembly. Now, as I recall, this does require that you use the existing springs. That's not a problem. If you watched the first series, you probably saw that it was a bit of work getting these body panels back on, but I've done a little bit of work on this before and since, and now that I've kind of acclimated to the process, it becomes much easier once you've done it once or twice. So the first step is going to be removing the little E-clip here. Having an assortment of small screwdrivers is always good. Having the Kyosho specific sized screwdriver tips for the various Phillips heads is worth having, but there are also some things like these E-clips where a micro straight edge comes in handy. There we go. That's a little tough to get off because it does kind of press fit. Once you get it into motion, it does come off a little more easily. Don't forget you've got a steering wire down there. Okay. Now, you cannot use the original fender. It does not swap over. The one that comes with the aluminum part screws on to the side here. As you can see, there's two small bolts. And this comes with an axle. And it looks like it uses the same pin, same clip, but this axle is a little bit longer. That's why they provide an extra axle. And so you need to make sure you save the E-clip that came with the stock axle. And then we have a new Allen bolts that hold the shocks in. And it looks like another part that you need from this is this pin. And I suspect that that just pulls right out of the plastic housing here. Yeah, it must. There we go. Good thing to know. There's a little flange up here at the top. So I was thinking that I might be able to take the top off and put this in from below, but I'm not going to be able to do that. So let me tighten these back down again. That's interesting. There's actually little ball bearings at the steering head as well. Now, this was something I had considered adjusting a little further. There's a rake adjustment, and I did get a nice improvement from the stickier tire, especially from the steering wire. The stiffer steering wire made a big difference, and the roller guides also definitely help. I think as long as I've got this apart, I am going to increase the rake a little more. This one is a tough one to adjust because it's got a little bit of a ratchet action going there. Before I start putting that on, I want to get this hooked onto the wire. Another advantage to this aluminum fork set is that you can see that the fork tubes are narrower than these, which means that the maximum left and right angles are going to be a little further. It's probably an extra degree or two of turn. Okay, there is a little bit of play. Now, there's a couple of options. Now, there's only two, really, because this bottom bracket does not come up as far. It hits these little stops here. I could put a small shim in place, or I can loosen the top and slide it down the fork a little bit to take up that extra bit of slack. I'm going to start with that. I think what I need is a very small shim. This is the smallest washer I've got. I want maximum ground clearance. I've already stiffened up the rake, so I'm going to put the shim on from the bottom. I'm going to put the wheel on first. That way I've got these little shock stanchions in place. Okay, it's having a hard time getting the bearing through there. That's odd. The bearing won't fit onto the axle. It may just be... Let me try polishing that a little bit. Okay, I solved the problem of this little axle not fitting through the bearing. What I did was I put the end into a Dremel like this, sticking out like so, and just used a little bit of 220 sandpaper to polish that down a little bit. It may have been this gold coating that they've put on. Regardless, it wasn't fitting through, and now it fits through just fine. It just took a little bit of work. Might have been able to do it without a Dremel, just by doing it by hand, but the Dremel seemed like the fastest, best way to do that. And as I did in the previous video, I should be able to get this little E-clip on using this pair of tweezers. Now the wheel is attached to the fork stanchions, and I can now use the original springs and what I would recommend for adjusting these is I would tighten them down just till they hit base, and I would start there, and once they're at base you can back them off to adjust how stiff the suspension is going to be up front. But once they are at base, you can come back a uniform number of turns, so you could unscrew them, 2 rotations on this side, 2 rotations on that side. You definitely want to keep left and right even. If you get confused or you're not sure, just tighten them down to base. I gotta say, this is outstanding. The little bit of trouble that it took to polish up that little rod and getting a little spacer in there to get everything to lock down, the amount of stiction is almost non-existent. You really have those springs working. This is what I had hoped for from this front end suspension, was that it would be nice and smooth, and just a little bit of weight on the top here immediately gets that suspension into motion. It glides seamlessly up and down. That's really nice. It's going to be interesting to see how that impacts ride height, if at all. This is the hardest part of the whole process of getting this back together, is getting that little circuit board to drop in. Okay, I think I'm in place. Having a little flashlight handy so you can verify that the card is indeed in that slot, and it is. These are the parts that are left over: front axle, front fork bolts, and the 2 screws. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this off camera and set it aside in case I ever want it. But as you can see, that new front fork really looks nice, and as you can see from the action, it is just super smooth. I do wish that I could keep the original fender with the color and the nice little polished on decals, but I think it's definitely worth the change. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up off camera. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a few things about this Kyosho front fork. I'm going to do a follow-up video to show you the added performance and how the bike rides. If you haven't already, please subscribe and please click like. Thanks for watching.